Good afternoon. Alex Hill from CN2 Technology, formerly Merlin Mobility. You may be familiar with our prior branding. So I'm here to talk about not AR to CAD in 5 minutes, but AR for the enterprise. And at a show like this, certainly somebody has to show the enterprise, right? So there is some relationship between Star Trek and augmented reality. If you think about it, the engineers could always go into these alien ships and they could somehow understand what was going on. How did they do that? AR goggles. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, right, Geordi could do that. But what about Scotty? What about Scotty? How did he do that? Contacts. Scotty wore contact lenses. All right. So my company, we do consumer-based services work, and we also do. This is an example of something that we have running at the Georgia Aquarium. We've also done some applications for Coca-Cola. We focus on very high-end, high-fidelity type augmented reality work. And we also do industrial work. This is something we did for Thermoplan, and I'll show this video at the end. So we have a platform. Aside from our services work, we're developing what we consider to be an enterprise-grade platform. It involves a studio and a CMS for uploading your content, storing your content, managing it, and then a browser technology, and then analytics on the back end for monitoring ROI, et cetera. So this is an example of our analytics. It's aggregated analytics, but it also includes things like post hoc a custom event generation, meaning later afterwards you say, I want to capture a particular event, and also things like funnels. And we're developing something interesting called sort of 3D funnels, where we track the position of the user during the AR experience, and we say, well, people who moved over here, they were less successful than people who went over there. So it's a clustering of 3D data. So this is example, some screenshots, uploading content to the system. This is uploading a model here. We have some material assignments so that you can bring in raw CAD data and color it, et cetera. And then we also, which I think is unique, is we have labeling. We have 2D labeling, simple UI elements, and also dynamic labeling that avoids content. And I'll show you some more of that later. So the reason we think it's enterprise class is it's got a content management system with things like a Mongo backend and AWS's CloudFront for delivery of content. It's multi-tenant, easy to set up and distribute to multiple employees, accounts. We have a Unity SDK, which, like I mentioned, dynamic labeling, and a lot of tracking analytics that allows to do things that you're not used to seeing. Let's say you have a brochure with 2 pages, and you want to look back and forth between these 2 pages, see the content swap out. Then this is the type of thing. AR to 3D transitions. When something we believe in is that it shouldn't always be AR. If somebody looks away from the content, then the same 3D content should go into a 3D mode, and they should be able to access it there. I mentioned the Content Studio. All of these functions are available there, physically based rendering, et cetera. Unity is the game engine that's driving our rendering on our mobile browser. Some interesting features, let me go back for a second here, is that we're not based on this idea of a single marker. You can have multiple markers per scenes. You can have multiple targets. You can have multiple scenes use the same target. And we're also focused on accommodating offline use. So it's not cloud-based. You don't have to have. That's an option in the system, but you can also cache your markers and your content on the mobile device. We have content styling that allows you to style content, change that on the fly, and have your whole theme change in your dynamically, and analytics, as I mentioned, something about that before. Finally, we have a data API, which is sort of modeled after Parse's famous or well-known REST-based API, and we use JSON schema for some presentation stuff, which I'll mention in a minute. So this is sort of an example of, beyond the usual use case, how our system, I think, is powerful. So for instance, we have this style manager. You can bring in fonts and background images, and then have those applied and changed in your mobile application and in web-based applications. And then we have an object interface mapper that takes JSON schema and will build interface things like radio buttons, drop-downs, etc. And then, as I mentioned, there's an API, a REST-based API, that when people make changes, it goes in the database, and it's easy to get at that data. And finally, we have analytics. So that's really all I wanted to say today, is introduce our platform. This is just a video. I'm sorry it's a little choppy, but it's just some stuff that is an example, and I'm ready to take any questions anybody has.
Okay, so questions. I think everyone's watching the video, Alex, so maybe after that, that's
Yeah, well.
Was this video also online?
Everybody else was taking extra time.
So I have a question.
Stop that.
Polygon count-wise, I mean,
Yeah.
about what level do you get before you start to see performance issues?
These days, of course, it depends on the hardware. I mean, if you're, we won the Epson Moverio Challenge recently, which with a application for last year's Darling, the Epson Moverio, and you can barely push any polygons in Android on headwear, but on an iPad Air 2, it's easily a couple 100,000 polygons, and that's why we use Unity as our rendering engine, because we don't really think that, we think that's the most optimized platform at this moment for delivering content.
Right on. Oh, here we go.
So my question is actually not just to you, to everyone else who was in the service maintenance space, and you can see there's an explosion of people trying to do some form of that, whether it's Scope AR or you guys or whoever. So this is a question, and I say this from the viewpoint of my customers, because we talk to probably Fortune 1000 on a daily basis, maybe talk to 500 of them over a space of 2 years. And there's a difference between their acceptability for VR and AR. And they have a question, I'd like to pose it to everybody here. If you have a good response, I'd love to go give it back to them, is this. Their question is, AR seems to be great 60, 70% of the time, and lighting is great, no metallic, reflections, blah, blah, blah. But the other 30%, when it's dark, they go in a room, there's no light. They typically just have a flashlight sometimes. When you tell that to them, that scares them away, right? Because they're all about, I don't mind an 80% solution that works 100% of the time. What's the best answer to go back to give them? Because they've just about got used to the fact of using VR applications, so they'll use either Unity-based applications or 3D interactive training applications. They're comfortable with that. They pull out your, you pull out your tablet, no matter what the lighting, that's going to play the exact same way. It's played 50 times over. The AR application, well, we'll see, right? Of the lighting, everything else. So when you talk to someone who's a CIO or training manager or service maintenance manager, those kind of things scare them away. What's our best response as an industry,
So I don't know if you attended the industry day yesterday in the main theater, but Jürgen Lumera from Bosch was talking about some of their success with documentation, and he was highlighting the point that AR can't be, it has to be additive. You have to be adding something. You can't create a situation where you change the worker's workflow, and then if AR doesn't work, it's broken. I mentioned earlier that we do these 3D to AR transition. So anytime we do technical documentation, we're really creating a 3D interactive technical manual. And it's not just an AR application. So it's getting your technical data and your documentation into a 3D format that is also AR. Now, so when AR doesn't apply, then you have the information. So in a dark room, you don't necessarily do AR. Another thing I would say to that is that a lot of times people think of AR as needing to be a full-on interaction, but you can have sort of micro interactions. Thad Starner, who was on the Google team from Georgia Tech, coined this term, and I like it. It means that you can do AR briefly. You don't have to do it long to get the information that you have, as long as you capture the context. If you have the orientation you have to the device, you can freeze it. You can go on about your business and continue to do the work, or you can just use AR for the contextual part. There's a company called IQ Agent who's having a lot of success with Johnson & Johnson. Their product really just connects, they call it augmented reality, but it's really just making a connection between ERP data and somebody on the floor with an iPad. They look at a QR code or something like that, connection made between the piece of equipment, etc. So we don't have to go full bore on AR. That's one part of my answer, and the other one is that AR needs to be additive.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Alex.